Vice Chair of OBU, and Kehinde, which probably a lot of you should know, is the Chair. And as you know, we've dedicated this year to Malcolm X. Because we're an independent organisation, we have declared this year, Year X, to honour Malcolm X, the 50th year since his assassination, the 90th year since his birth. So this is one of many events that's going to happen this year in regards to Malcolm X. This one is called the Ballot or the Bullet. I don't know if some of you got the Malcolm X flyers that we've done, but the original date for the Ballot or the Bullet was going to be in April, but as it was so close to election times, and we figured probably people wanted to talk and reason about it and make a decision whether or not they wanted to register to vote or whatever the case may be. So we swapped those events around because it was just practical to do so. And I said, and again, because we're independent, we can kind of govern our own thing, we're able to do those things. One of the things that we're doing right now, we're trying to reopen the Marcus Garvey Nursery, which is on Linwood Road in Handsworth. And as part of our fundraising, we have some booklets for sale. Now, these booklets are called Power of the Movement, Pioneers of the Fight. And what we did, we handpicked some of our ancestors that were instrumental in challenging colonialism. Now, it's some names that you probably won't hear every day, probably not even in October. People like Mbandaka, people like Thomas ShakaRa, we've got Zumbi, Queen Nanny, Nat Turner. There's a lot of these names that we should know that we probably don't know. So by nowhere are we saying this is like everybody that has something to do with, you know, challenging colonialism, but this is a handful of people to give you a little introduction for those that may not have a clue. It's good for children. It's good just for like a, you know, just a quick guide and a reminder. So we're selling these for £2, and like I said, these goes the money goes directly to the fund for reopening the Marcus Garvey Nursery. So if you'd like to purchase one, get them while they're hot. And with your permission, we'll get started in like 5 to 10 minutes. We're just waiting for a few more people to come. So we're on your time, respect your time. Thank you for being on time, but we just want to give some people a few okay?
Poorly signed posters.
Sorry?
Poorly signed posters.
Doesn't it say Baker Building at the front?
It's, you know, I used to come here many years ago. Let me just say this before you start. It was hard for me to come into this building today.
Okay.
Because of the institutional racism which I suffered.
Yeah, it used to be a
under the prestigious Birmingham Polytech. So I had to be, and you know, I think these people should give me a doctorate because I turned out to be a very brilliant student after that. You know, I'm serious. You know, but I felt so. I mean, it was many years ago, so it's changed now. This used to be our drinking den down the bottom. So have they cleansed themselves? You know, that's a question. But anyway, that's my opening shot.
Thank you very much.
For those of you who don't know who that person is, that's the legendary Maxie Hale.
Maxie Hale.
Who was here at when Adam and Eve were here. So the revolution shall not be signposted.
Defeat that.
So if the police arrive in about an hour, they're not looking for anybody but Maxie, right? For a consultation.
One question asked, do all of you know what OBU is about, what we stand for? Yes, no? OBU is Organisation of Black Unity. Yeah, so we're based directly off Malcolm X's Organisation of African American Unity, which was one of the last things that he did before he was assassinated. So the main principle behind the organisation is to build a mass network of black people, yeah, and they have a paid membership, and that's why, like I said, we're able to remain independent. What tends to happen with a lot of organisations that rely upon like government funding, the funding comes, everything's all good, then the funding goes, and the project has to close down. And there's no follow-up, there's no following up with the community, and things are just left as they are. So our principle is to be self-reliant, self-sufficient, so we can discuss matters that are important to us. We can use language that we understand. We can be free to talk amongst ourselves without peering and thinking, oh, we might lose our funding if we say that. Right? We can say black, we don't have to, you understand what I mean? So when you're in this environment, you're free, you're amongst your people, we speak how we want to speak. Obviously, we're not going to disrespect anybody, but feel free to express yourself. Okay, it's not necessarily we're in an academic setting, but it's not about that here. It's about expressing. It's about talking about the issues that we need to talk about in an environment that is safe, in an environment that is welcoming. Okay, we ask members to pay. The current fee is £5 a month if you're working, and £4 a month if you're not. Or if you pay for the year, you can get like a month free basically. And like I said, that's paid into an account. So if you imagine 500 people paying £5 a month into an account, we can do some things with that. Okay, and if we've got 100 people paying £5 a month into an account, we can do something with that. Yeah, and it's like I said, it's very practical. You know, if we need to have an event, we've got money there already. If we need to get a building, if we need to make a trip to London because some of our brothers up there need help. If, you know, any parents need help in school, we have like money and resources to write letters. You know, the power of being part of an organisation. You know, if any of you here have a problem in like school with your children, and you come as a team, you come as a unit, the strength that comes within that. You know what I mean? So we act as advocates. If any of you have any businesses within the community, are there any services? You know, we're looking to link them, to interlink them, or looking to create services where the gaps are. So Kehinde's back now, so.
Sorry, we actually we are expecting somebody, and I don't know what she is. It is part of Year X. Year X is a year of events around Malcolm X's legacy. Malcolm being, I would say, one of the most important and one of the most misunderstood figures of the 20th century. Political legacy of Malcolm X is something that we don't know that much about. It's something that is misrepresented a lot of the time. Anti-white and violent is basically the extent to what we know about Malcolm, but there's lots and lots more to it. As a series, like I said, there's one every month. This one's particularly looking at the elections, political power. What does it mean to vote? What is the power of voting? As a community, how can we organise ourselves to vote better, in effect? And one of Malcolm's most famous speeches, the Ballot or the Bullet. Really, and this is in 1964. He gives a speech around election time in the States, and he's trying to articulate that we need to be more politically mature as a community. We're very politically immature. I would argue we're still very politically immature, and we haven't learned these lessons that Malcolm lays down very, very clearly in this speech. So, format-wise, I'm going to speak very, very little. We have a panel, and we have some Malcolm clips. I've taken about a couple of minute clips. There's about 5 of them to kind of steer the discussion. I haven't really told the panel this yet, because I only was here today. But
Okay then, so I'm going to run.
Steer the debate. There's like 5 areas that Malcolm touches on in the speech. The first one is, what is the ballot or the bullet? What does he mean by the ballot or the bullet? What's the point of it? The second one is around the politics. There are certain political controls which are put on the electorate to limit our power as voters. So I'll play a bit of that, explain it at the time. Also, he talks about the power of the minority vote. He's talking about the power of the African American vote. In America now has about 40 million black people. In Britain, there's about 3 million others. There's a report by Operation Black Vote that came out a couple of weeks ago. They said the power of the minority vote is hugely important, right? Who gets in what seats, etc., but we don't organise it properly. There's also a section, which is why I wanted Paulette Hamilton particularly to be here, about when he talks about the Democratic Party have failed us. Yeah? And actually, if you look at the Labour Party in Britain, Labour Party being very similar to the Democratic Party, they failed the black community. So how do we make sure that we keep the parties that we're voting for accountable? We're going to vote for a party, how are we going to make sure we're going to keep it accountable? And then also the final bit is about political independence. Malcolm makes a very, very, very clear point that politics isn't just about political parties. Politics happens outside political parties. What happens outside of mainstream politics is probably more important than actually who you vote for in the general election. Those are the 5 kind of things. I'll just play them when it seems relevant. We're lucky to have a distinguished panel, Dr. Martin Glynn, who is BCU, you still Wolverhampton as well?
Just peripatetic. I went all over the place.
All over the place, yes. A lot of knowledge about Malcolm X. And Malcolm X. Actually, no, I'll let people introduce themselves.
Yeah, I suppose I'm known as a criminologist and lots of other stuff, specifically Malcolm X. I'm fortunate that I actually, 25 years ago, studied the assassination, went to back Boston, lived in the community. His old house is still there. His sister refused to put it to a shrine. And I studied him for like 30 years. And I'm one of the only people probably in the world to have all of his speeches on vinyl.
Vinyl?
Yep, I've got them. Ballot and the Bullet speech on vinyl, because we used to do Malcolm X parties in America where you'd go and listen to the speeches and discuss them and whatever. Went to Harvard University with people who met him. More importantly, I suppose, me being here tonight really is just to give a different context, because as a criminologist, in criminology, Malcolm X is seen as the ultimate desister who went into criminal justice, went to prison, came out, faith-based conversion, transformed things. And the Ballots and the Bullets speech is probably more significant than Martin Luther King. Why? Because we've never learned from what, if you're looking at, if you study sociology and criminology, the Ballot and the Bullets is the speech that you should listen to. The I Have a Dream speech is fine for motivation and upliftment, but it doesn't deal with the social reality of us. So, it'll come out later on, but that's my thing. I'm also very keen to hear, especially the younger generation, about how you are interrogating someone who died in 1965. Because it's about what relevance does he play, not just to you in Black History Month, but how do you put it into your parenting, how do you put it into your lives, as opposed to just listening to us as experts, so-called experts. So that's me. You can find that. She works with my son, so that's a good thing.
It's, you know, I'm got connections. My name is Kush, or some people might know me as Tamar. I'm Vice Chair of OBU. In the words of Malcolm, I'm not a politician. I'm not even a student of politics. I'm not even British. Well, he said American, but I'm black. I'm African. I live in England, and look around, yeah, you know. So I'm coming from a grassroots, not necessarily uneducated, but maybe not as well articulated as some people may expect. But I'm just here from the streets, and like I said, just talking it as it is and how the reality is. So I'm not up here with anything expertise, but, you know, with men like Malcolm, you know, nothing's changed. You know, men like Malcolm have, like, set the platform for us, and I'm fortunate that I was raised up in an environment where there was pictures of Malcolm. I see my dad reading Malcolm. Marcus Garvey has always been, you know, the first picture I see when I walk in my house. So I'm just fortunate for that, and I'm just here to express that experience. That's it.
Greetings everyone, my name is Tafadzwa ShakaRa Mbandaka. Most people just call me Shaka or ShakaRa, so feel free to use either one. To start with, to just introduce myself. Firstly, I'm a member of an organisation called the Alkebulan Revivalist movement. We are based in London, so I'm coming up here from London to be with you today. We are a black liberation organisation that is based upon African spirituality and culture, and also based upon the political legacies of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and Omowale Malcolm X. And so I come here really as a student of the black liberation movement. I'm a journalist, I'm a spoken word artist with a collective called The Best Kept Secret. And you know, enough different things, you know what I mean? So Omowale Malcolm X is one of my major inspirations, heroes in life, and a man that I have studied relatively well. In the context of looking at how his legacy applies to our situation today. And so I'm pleased to be here. Thank you to the OBU for inviting me, and came as my good sister, you know what I mean? So we love that. So yeah, give thanks, you know?
Thank you. Greetings family, forgive me for my lateness. You're allowed to talk to me, so no, forgive me, I came from work in it, and unfortunately a sister couldn't be here today. She was helping out a campaign, a street campaign in Bristol, and she caught the wrong train, unfortunately. She's on her way back home, safe and sound, hopefully, so no worries about that. But I'm here on behalf of BEMA, which is a Black and Ethnic Minority Association on the University of Birmingham campus. Quite honestly, I was on the committee a couple of years ago, but I'm still very heavily supportive what they're doing there, and I guess for the panel I can bring maybe a student perspective with regards to Malcolm X's legacy, as well as some of the issues that maybe young people, particularly students, have in mind and are kind of working towards combating. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So like I said, I've got a few clips. I think the best place to start would be a couple of minutes, Malcolm explaining what does he mean by the ballot or the bullet. What does it actually mean? And I'll just let Malcolm explain it and then put it to the panel.
Americans here in this country. And 1964 looks like it might be the year of the ballot or the bullet. Why does it look like it might be the year of the ballot or the bullet? Because Negroes have listened to the trickery and the lies and the false promises of the white man now for too long. And they're fed up. They've become disenchanted. They've become disillusioned. They've become dissatisfied. And all of this has built up frustrations in the black community that makes the black community throughout America today more explosive than all of the atomic bombs the Russians can ever invent. Whenever you got a racial powder keg sitting in your lap, you're in more trouble than if you had an atomic powder keg sitting in your lap. When a racial powder keg goes off, it doesn't care who it knocks out the way. Understand this, it's dangerous. And in 1964, this seems to be the year. Because what can the white man use now to fool us? After he put down that march on Washington, and you see all through that now, he tricked you, had you marching down to Washington. Yes, had you marching back and forth between the feet of a dead man named Lincoln and another dead man named George Washington, singing "We Shall Overcome." He made a chump out of it. He made a fool out of it. He made you think you were going somewhere and you end up going nowhere but between Lincoln and Washington. So today our people are disillusioned. They've become disenchanted. They've become dissatisfied. And in their frustrations they want action.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it there because we've got more clips to come. But I think that briefly kind of shows what Malcolm's talking about. The ballot or the bullet is saying, if America won't give black people in America proper citizenship, real rights, real freedom, then it's going to be revolution. It's going to be bloodshed. There's going to be riots. There's going to be panic. It's going to explode. That's what Malcolm's saying, basically. Right? And I kind of want to put this to the panel, particularly when it comes to something that happened yesterday in Ferguson. Anybody pick that up in Ferguson? Yeah. There was a protest at celebration, and some of the protesters started shooting at the police. Right? Because
it wasn't from the protesters, but from like an outside.
whoever it was, somebody was shooting at the police, right? Whoever it was, somebody had said too much. This has gone on for too long, and we're not going to take it anymore. And it's violence, and it's bloodshed. And this is what Malcolm's basically saying, that if you don't treat the population correctly, then, and if you don't give people the full right to vote and full freedom, then it's going to explode. And he talks about this idea of the powder keg, the racial powder keg. And I kind of wonder how relevant is that today? How relevant is that for black people in Britain? And I'll come back to the panel first.
I want to give a context. In 1846, a young black guy, African American, called William Friedman, murdered 4 white people and was found not guilty. He murdered 4 white people. And it led to the first case of insanity, what was called black rage. In law, it's referred to as urban psychosis. We know that the social conditions of racism imposed on black people leads to a certain type of offending behavior, which is referred to as black rage. We have road rage, black rage. In 1976, Colin Ferguson went on a New York subway and shot 20-odd people because he said he'd had enough. So in reality, if you look at Malcolm's position, it was established in 1846 that the inhuman treatment of black people under the American Constitution led to black people doing this thing, what we call black rage. If we look at the case of Lee Rigby, if we look at what happened in Denmark and Paris, if you look what's happened in Ferguson, if you look what happened in New York when the guy took out 2 policemen, my work in criminal justice in mental health would suggest that a lot of young men in prison right now are bordering on psychotic based on the same thing. So not only is it relevant, but actually what's more relevant to an extent is that the response to trying to deal with the problem is mass incarceration, is actually over-representation of mental health. But more importantly, based on where we're located in terms of poor communities, we don't have the social mobility to work. Because if we hate white people so much based on oppression, we kill white people. But we don't. Because the mobility pattern that enables you to, we don't have it. So one of the things about being poor, disaffected, black, and marginalised is we project it onto ourselves. So if you study the case as I've done in 1846, William Friedman was battered with a stick in prison based on something he never did. Went to the police and said, find the person that did it. They couldn't, so he murdered 4 white people, and it was successfully argued that the conditions that he faced led to this. So he was found guilty, but it was the first case of insanity. In 1840, now in 2015, if you study mental health and you study suicide, black men, depression, you can see that the urban psychosis is at an all-time level. So in a way, not only is it relevant, but it's actually cost us a generation, several generations. So we're actually, like in Northern Ireland, young white children grew up who were Protestant and said, I hate Catholics. You've got young black people growing up in a world of I hate based on that kind of historical legacy. So I'm just saying, not only is it relevant, but it's something that a lot of us are in denial about. It can't be explained by saying it's just black on black crime. It's not that. So that's my bit to kick it off. So,
Well, as far as like the violence and the shooting at police, I mean, I'm going to take this to another area. So at the beginning of Malcolm's speech, he talks about Islam is his religion, and that's a personal thing between him and God. But his moral philosophy, his political and social and economical philosophy is black nationalism, okay? And he says that to say that when he's talking about like the marching, the protesting, and even he said in this part of the speech that with the march that Martin Luther King did between Lincoln and Washington, that's what we kind of find ourselves doing. So metaphorically, we find ourselves here marching between Conservative and Labour, or we find ourselves marching from town to Handsworth, or we're constantly marching and marching and marching and marching. And just like Malcolm says, you can't sing upon some freedom, but you can swing upon some freedom. And what he means by that is that, the passiveness and the, trying to be almost, this pride in suffering and almost this turn the other cheek kind of mantra that we've taken up. And I do blame religion a lot for that as well, right? If he was saying it was too much back in the 60s, it's 2015, come on. So that's a natural reaction for anyone. Sometimes I feel like going out there and shooting some police. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's a natural reaction, because what's going to happen now, this is what happens. We get very euphoric when there's an incident. We get our placards up, we start marching, we're doing all this. What's going to happen next week? Why do we always have to wait for a headline for us to be doing, for some action to be taken? So because nothing's happening constantly behind the scenes, it seems like we're never getting anywhere, because every time something happens, we're starting again. We've got to regenerate that energy. We've got to go out in the streets and we've got to start again. And it's pointless. So it's not surprising to me, just like when the riots happened, none of those children, none of those people that were doing those things were political. They're just tired of the passive, they're just tired of just having to accept and succumb to whatever the system tells us is going on. So I'm not surprised that it happened. I think it's going to happen even more, because sometimes I feel like the media's trying to wind us up as well. It's like, you go on Facebook and you're like, is this current? Is this today? Like, this cannot be happening again. And how much times are we supposed to see these things and just, we shall overcome, or pray over it, or whatever the case is now? If we have a more nationhood or a nation building type mentality, these things couldn't happen. These things couldn't happen. And unfortunately, because this shooting wasn't organised and it wasn't something that was that was orchestrated properly, it's just going to seem like a one-off effect. You're going to have people saying it was, you're going to have people within our own community probably trying to demonise them, not understanding the bigger picture, but really with their placards to go and march again. And I'm personally, not to say I don't condone violence, but by any means necessary. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, no worry. I think I'm going to start by quoting Malcolm in another speech. Yeah. that he gave, where he said, when the people are sad over their condition, they do nothing to change it. Sadness doesn't change conditions. It's only when they get mad that they change their condition. It takes madness to change condition. And you can take madness on a number of different levels. It means different things, but it has the same effect. You see what I'm saying? I think the ballot or the bullet can be explained, and there's very many explanations that you can give for it, but I think it can be explained in terms of you have two different options. One is totally self-reliant and based upon the intensity of the condition that you're facing. That's the bullet. The ballot is the more diplomatic approach, yeah? And both are valid within any situation. Yeah, you have your diplomacy, and then you have a time when you do away with diplomacy completely. And so, but what he was setting up for in terms of the whole entire speech was how we need to be educated about the use of both these means. So the bullet can't be just a random exercise where we just go in and run through a street and burn up some buildings. We have to be educated about how to use the bullet. And the ballot can't be just a thing whereby we're begging the system of oppression to integrate us into it, as he said in the speech. We have to be educated about how we use the ballot in our own interest, not as a thing whereby we pledge our allegiance to the flag or a political party, but our interests remain intact, whatever we're doing, whatever the tactic and the strategy is. I think, in answer to the question more directly, I think in reality, there are very few places in the Western world, as it stands now, that what happened in Ferguson will take place on a general level. We have to look at what Ferguson looks like. The city of Ferguson is a predominantly black area. That when you look at the social indicators, it's obvious that black people are being oppressed. It's obvious. You know what I'm saying? There's no question about it. When you look at the fact that 90% of the population is black, 90% of the police force is white, just little things like stop for ticket offences when you're driving a car, or 3-4 times more likely to be stopped and searched. You know what I'm saying? These kinds of things are just obvious. Police brutalities are rife throughout the community, so the conditions dictate. This is enough. What the media likes to do is just focus on what happened with what's the young man's name? Down at my head in that. Michael Brown. That's what they like to focus on, because that officer was found not guilty without dealing with the condition of the people, ignore the condition of the people. Yeah, and so what it does really is it suggests that we need to base our strategies on the conditions of the people. That's the first point. Yeah. Secondly, in relation to that, I think nowadays we have too many disparities between how we live in Ferguson, New York, Los Angeles, London, Birmingham, yeah, and in different areas, even just in London where I live, you've got disparities so that there's too much comfort to warrant us exploding, if that makes sense. And it's only through a certain level of education that makes us know that we have to explode why we're going to explode, yeah? Yeah, there's that.
Oh, you know, I'm so sorry I'm late. Oh, when you overbook yourself, it's not a good thing. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's well explained. I think I'll leave it there for now, because I think there's so much to take out of that. But you know, I hand it over.
So there's been a mention of Ferguson. I think with regards to discourse happening around students, I think being young people, being attached to social media and things, I think a lot of people feel like the hashtag Black Lives Matter really jumped out to them. And instead now we have a conversation that is happening where a lot of young people are asking themselves, we're beginning to realise that this is not spoken about in mainstream media, and this is, and begin to question why is that happening? Why is it that the Charlie Hebdo case was all over the place? You got African leaders coming from all corners of the world coming to march in solidarity, yet right at home, black people just being massacred and no one saying nothing about it. So I think particularly what happened on our campus as well, I feel like a lot of the students feel like they needed to kind of come express that we're here, we care. We don't need no one to come and validate ourselves as a nation, but we need to stand up and say that these people are our family and they're important to us. So that's why it seems like we've been doing vigil after vigil, and to a lot of people it would seem like it was just a bunch of a group of 10 people just kind of making some noise and giving some speeches, but from the people that have turned up, I've really found like a deep, profound sense of just a kind of real outrage. Like, why is this happening? Why am I only hearing about this in these circles? So, in terms of what's happening in Ferguson, I feel like there's a lot of, everyone's kind of looking in their direction. And we did get, we had a chance, a few of us, to meet Patrice, which was one of the founders of the hashtag itself. And she was very supportive of the families that, of course, have been victims of police brutality, even right here in Birmingham. And we appreciated the solidarity. And I also find it quite interesting about their travel to Palestine. So I understand completely that we're all living in different places with different kind of boundaries and things going on, but there's starting to be a link between different struggles, which I find quite interesting, and would be nice to see where it goes and to what intention that will kind of come to. So yeah, in terms of voting and things like that, again, I feel like there's a lot of initiative by the government to have kind of workshops to encourage young people to vote, and okay, I get it. They think that there's a lot of young people that don't necessarily understand the process, how do they get registered, things like that, etc., etc. But there are a lot of young people who are very aware of that and now beginning to ask themselves the question, well, one, should I vote, and if so, who and why, type thing. So I think that's another question, another kind of conversation that I don't think a lot of young people are being allowed to have discussion around. Instead, we're just kind of being told loads of things, made false promises, and nothing's happening. So instead of being critical of, particularly in this country, what for students and young people has been promised to, and then the lies that have come, and we've seen it already before. Instead now, I feel like instead of pushing people to vote, maybe creating more of an awareness of some of the things and the challenges that young people should have in mind with regards to where because they have the power, like where do they want to push themselves and create their future. So yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Paulette has joined us. Just to catch.
Sorry, I'm late. Before I start.
Just to catch you up, I played a 2-minute clip of Malcolm explaining what the ballot or the bullet is. And effectively, what he's saying is either it's full freedom for Black Americans, or it's violence, it's disorder, it's resistance on the streets. And I used the example of Ferguson yesterday and the protests and some people shooting at the police officers. And is this a relevant thing today? Are people that frustrated that if we can't get proper equality, then people are going to turn to other means, other kinds of ways to express themselves?
For me, as an elected politician, I see it coming. Birmingham, I'm not going to talk about America. I don't live there. I'm not going to talk about America unless I have to. I talk about what I know. Birmingham has become like a 3-tier society. The young are not engaging. It's not that I don't think they understand. I just don't think they feel they belong in the system. And with what the government has done over the last year, where they've changed the voting rights in the system, it's actually alienated young people even more. Many of them think it's a way of targeting or them feeling as if it's a way of the government monitoring them. And they don't want to be part of that system. I don't feel that as older people, and I'll put myself in that sphere, even though I hate it, but I am. I feel that we are not targeting the young enough. I feel that if you're going to encourage somebody to vote, they have to see why they're voting. They have to understand why they're voting. A lot of our young people don't see anything out there for them. I feel that a lot of our young people are struggling to see a future. I think in the 2011 riots, it was a really interesting time for people like myself, because people went out and rioted, people say, for economic reasons. I feel the next riots, which I actually feel there will be one, they will rise up because they feel they have there is nowhere else for them to go. I feel as a society, I feel that we have said to our young people, education, education, education. Then when they've gone out there and got education, 9 out of 10 of them can't get what was promised on the packets before they went into education. So that's alienated them. I feel that they are looking at what the product of what's going on out there with the music industry, with crooked politicians, with everything else that's going on out there, and they're thinking, well, why should I be part of that? And I'll give you an example. My daughter, she started her education being told she couldn't achieve. She had to walk out of school because they said to her there was no way she could get her A-levels. Now, at the time, I believed what the system was telling me, and she went into the system but in another way and became a barrister and did really well. But because the system had already targeted and labelled her, they had decided that she couldn't achieve, yet she did achieve and she did really well. But for her friends who are from ethnic minority groups or from lower white working class groups, even with the qualifications, they couldn't achieve in this country. So many of them have had to go abroad to get what really they should have got in this country. So you talk about the bullet or the vote. I'm not sure, although I believe in the vote and I believe in our right to use that vote or destroy that vote, I'm not sure that we will get what we really deserve in this country using the vote. But I don't know if we are a strong enough group to get what we want to get. If we have an uprising, I think we will be quashed in such a way we could lose a generation of our young people. So I am very torn. I went away and watched the Malcolm X film to make sure, and listened to a lot of what he'd said to make sure I was ready. We are not accepted in this society. I genuinely believe that. But I believe we're tolerated, and there's a big difference. But we still have to try to get through that door, even though many people say to me, we will never get through it. I have to believe, even at my age, that some of us will. And I'll stop there.
What people think? Ballot or the bullet? How relevant? So that idea, are we on the verge though? Are people that frustrated?
I think that concerning voting, it's the people get voted in, not through, but it's kind of, but not more so the voting of the public, but more so what happens at the dinner table with the rich men who pay for their campaigns to get those people, because they're on their agendas first when they have these people go around the country and talk about what they're going to promise to all of us. So it's more so about, you know, bringing our economic resources together and then laying out a plan about what do we want. If we give you this money, what are you going to give us if we elect you into this situation? So along with the vote, you need to put the economic backing behind it, because they're more likely, if you're giving your money to them, they're accountable, and so they're accountable to them.
I believe that as a black woman in politics, I am weak. I don't want to be weak, but I'm weak because I haven't got the following of a large group of people behind me, if that makes sense. So that makes me weak. I am then at the behest of other groups that choose to support me or choose not to support me. I've gone through a difficult time because I've stood up for the rights of black people in places that you would not believe. And what that has meant with standing up for the rights of BME communities, it has meant that it isolates you, because they see you as a big mouth, they see you as not being strategic, they see you as being quite ignorant, and they just don't see you as the type of person they want round their dinner table. So when it comes to positions of power, unless you're prepared to say yes sir, no sir, it's very difficult to get those positions and remain, I'm being polite now, and to remain who you are when you went into that position.
Sorry, can I say something? just for your benefit. In what's called critical race theory, there's a thing called interest convergence. And the argument is, based on power, unless it's in the interest of white people, things don't change for black. It happens in the legal system, in the education system. We lived in a privileged environment. Capitalism is not owned by us. We don't run the currency of Europe. We don't run gold. If you're talking about economics, it's fixed based on economic systems that we don't control. The resources that we have are exploited for other people to have it. So one of the things that's critical as a young person is to study interest convergence. Because the question is, for whose interest is it? And in critical race theory, it's about at what point, if you look at the game may have made in the last 20 years, it's not based on any leverage we've had, because we have no leverage. Economically, we don't. Let's take Europe. I don't know if you heard Nigel Farage this morning saying, let's abolish race legislation.
Yeah, it's about the...
Now what's ironic, if we do get rid of it, the Scottish National Party have looked at their independence. So if you study interest convergence, because it's about understanding what the speakers have said, it's understanding the structures that govern power. This is not about just money, this is about power, how power is expressed and articulated. And unfortunately, linguistically, there's the language of law, there's the language of the state. We have the language of oppression. We have the language of opposition. We don't have the language of liberation in terms of the mechanisms to do it. And I'm saying, where a lot of this is played out is legally. What rights do you have? Malcolm X represented human rights. He said, I can't sit at a lunch counter unless you treat me as a human being. We are in a climate now of civil rights. How many black people can get a job? How many black people do we see on TV? That's civil rights. But if you look at who gets shot at the most, who gets incarcerated the most, mentally ill, it's about us as human beings. So I'm saying, what you might want to do, go and study interest convergence and find a way, as a young person, to bring people to understand, as a young person, to structures of power. Because as a criminologist, the only thing that we get from rioting is an increase in criminal justice policy. Even though they say there's less police, when it comes to our community, and Paulette will tell you, we're over-policed.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to new drugs that you need to test on a black mind who flips because they're upset, there's no shortage of money to put new drugs into people's heads, but it's about interest convergence. And all I'm saying to you as a young person, one of the things we have to do is to spend more time studying power, so that you can assume it, because there's economic power, psychological power, emotional power. It's not just economic, it's more holistic. So I'm saying interest convergence, and hopefully if 1 hour a week you just study, then you'll be sitting on a platform talking to politicians about, no, you ain't going to do it, because you'll be able to deconstruct the power structure. So I'm just saying, you know, so you've got something to do when you leave here, as opposed to just...
And can I add quickly, if they want to destroy a race of people, you destroy the males.
Yeah.
Where are we overrepresented? I am the mental health champion for Birmingham. I was in a hearing today. Young black man, absolutely gorgeous looking, and they are just pumping him up with drugs. He's overweight, everything. I won't go into it, but it's just sad. And if you want to destroy a race of people, you destroy their men. And what is happening to our men in this society at the moment? They're overrepresented, I'm sure you know, in the criminal justice system. They're overrepresented in the mental health system. They're overrepresented when it comes to unemployment. They're not represented at all hardly in business. They're just nowhere to be found where they can build a family structure. Why is that?
Well, I'm going to bring it back to the basics a little bit, right? Let's look at the system as we know it already. This is before black people won the right to vote, okay? So you got this system that is full of corruption, full of fraud, full of broken promises, and that's from any day in history up until now. So this was happening already amongst themselves before we had the right to vote. Now, I actually would like to change it and say, instead of winning the right to vote, I think we've actually gained the right to play this game with them. So if they're not even addressing the needs of their owner, right? Because obviously, you know, you know, the Western system works on this elitist, right? So if they're not even addressing the needs of their own, right? Who are we? Do you understand what I mean? And it's like, how much more examples do we need? So there's an African proverb that says, you know, if children are not initiated into the village, they will burn it down just to feel its warmth, okay? Which basically translates into people need to feel as though they're involved, contributing to society. How do we do that? It's through the vote, okay? Let's just look at the reality of it. These people have their 5-year, their 10-year, their 15-year plans, their manifestos already. They're not waiting for us little common people on the ground to decide who and who's going to be in political power, right? If we take a work in education, right, if we take the examination systems, yes, don't get me wrong, GCSEs and SATs tells you, you know, the level of your child's attainment. But the main thing that they do is so the governments can plan for like institutions that are going to be needed. They know, you know, which system's going to be over. Sorry, let me just make sure I'm quoting it right. Yeah, they know what kind of like services are going to be under pressure. They know what services to, you know, to create. They know what legislations to create that keep people subjugated, that keeps the rich richer and the poor poorer. These things, they're not going to wait till May to decide what we're going to do now. Whatever's happening today was planned from years ago. Whatever's going to be happening 4 years from now, it's starting from, you understand what I mean? So they're not waiting on us little people underground to make any decisions. Now, what tends to happen is, you know, we see a black face and we get very happy, right? Oh, there's a black man there, there's a black woman there, well, okay. No disrespect to you, Master, because I know you're grassroots, I know you're from the, but like you said, you feel weak in your position because you're working or you're joined alliance with a main political party. So there's no way that you're gonna get, that strength that you have, yeah, that power that you have, there's no way it can be used within the rounds of these two political parties that have no interest with us anyway. Don't forget, our issues are very specific from the general population. So yeah, student rights and housing rights, they affect us all, but there are specific things that we need to address as a community that they're not interested in.
Well, how can they get interested in it?
No, I don't want them interested. No. See, I think about the segregation. I'm not interested in integration. Segregation for me is excellent, right? Segregation for me, I'm not trying to, like Asata Shakur says. Sorry, I just need to quote Asata, right? She said,
you know, I'm going to bring Malcolm in because, you know, Malcolm.
All right, yeah.
Let's what we're talking about, and then we'll come to you later. Okay? So I'm going to bring Malcolm in, and then we're going to, because why I'm bringing this bit in is because we've talked about the frustration with politics, and now we're touching on the political process. Actually, when you start to unpick the political process a little bit, it does look like a bit of a game, right? This is just a quick, I think it's like a minute on Malcolm when he's talking about something they call gerrymandering. You ever heard of gerrymandering? Yeah. Gerrymandering is where they draw the boundaries of things to exclude certain people. I think this is the right thing, but it's not.
I'm here in the North, they have the same thing. Yeah. The Democratic Party don't do it. They don't do it that way. They got a thing that they call gerrymandering. They maneuver you out of power. Even though you can vote, they fix it so you don't even know about it. They got you going and coming. In the South, they're outright political wolves. In the North, they're political foxes. A fox and a wolf are both canine. Both belong to the dog family. Now, you take your choice. You're going to choose a northern dog or a southern dog. Because either dog you choose, I guarantee you, you'll still be in the doghouse. This is why I say it's the ballot or the bullet. It's liberty or it's death. It's freedom for everybody or freedom for nobody.
All right, I wanted to throw that in because the underlying this is the question about what is the political structure like? What is the voting structure like? Would it surprise you to know that in Birmingham there is one parliamentary ward, which is majority ethnic minority, and there's one which is like 50-50, right, all green. Yeah? This is a city which has a lot, this part of Birmingham is 75% minority, and there's 170,000 people here. If you look at the way the political boundaries are drawn, they are clearly drawn to make sure that we do not outnumber white people in many parts of many parts of the country. In fact, there are very few actual political seats for Parliament which are majority of minority. But most of our cities have areas which are full of them, full of them, right? So that is something to take into account. Does that put you off voting? Does that make you think, well, what's the point in voting? Does that devalue your vote? I don't know. But I just want to throw that in there and go to the next slide.
Yeah, before, let me just say this. It's just really nice to see young people. And I think congratulations to this organization, because I've been around and I don't see another organization is as conscious as this organization. I think you need to give yourself a round of applause. And I don't say that lightly, I'm serious here. Because since racism is a planned process, it's planned, it's a planned process. It's not just direct, it's a planned process. Hence the division of our family and stuff like that. Work all the time. And since it's an inevitable process, the name that stands out to me right now is Steve Biko, the South African activist who they killed. Because it doesn't matter how, we're in an institution here now, right, where the young people are trying to acquire education, academic education. But if you don't have a black consciousness education running alongside that, which the state not going to give us, we'll have to give ourselves, then it doesn't matter what type of academic education you have. You then become dangerous. Right? The Trevor Phillips of this, no, I'm serious. You become, so I think an organization such as this, or what we need to do, is to actually consciously devise mechanism where we can teach young people black consciousness with, to run alongside the academic education, because we need it. And that's the observation I made just then. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. And that to me says something. Yeah. The greater part of it was not about who we vote for, how we vote, or nothing like that. It was about what do you do in your own community for yourself. We need to do it for self-philosophy. We need to do it now philosophy. We need to get it done now. That's what he said in the speech. Philosophy, right? So that's the first point. The second point, just following from what the elder has said, yeah, in terms of this black consciousness thing, right? The first question we have to answer is who we are. Yeah? If we don't know who we are, we don't know why we're here. We don't know who our allegiances are for, and that's part of the problem. Too many of us in this day and age, coming back to what I was saying earlier, identify simply as British. Yeah? And that's it. And when we identify with British, they have a number of different definitions within British to define us. So that's why we get things like, no disrespect, BME, black minority ethnic, working class, disaffected, disadvantaged, yeah? And all of these terminologies are not just labels that they put out there to say, ethnic minority means that, you have a heritage that's not of here and you're a minority in the country. No. These are examples of power relationships that exist between us and what we call the so-called dominant society. Yeah? So, when Malcolm X says, I'm a black nationalist, yeah? Two very, very important things, yeah? Blackness defines his identity, his heritage, organization of Afro-American unity, which he hadn't established at this point, right, but we're going on to establish. And at the end of the speech, he talks about him going to Africa, yeah? Him going to Africa to study the conditions over there, to help us to understand how we can, develop ourselves over here. But I'm saying that the first question in terms of that black consciousness we have to understand is the identity of who we are. Because at the moment, what happens is we don't deal with black issues because we're dealing with minority issues.
Yeah.
And it's not the same thing. I don't care what anybody's going through, it's not the same thing. I don't fight anybody from dealing with them thing and dealing with their issues. Yeah, and if we have areas of, where we can, do our thing, we can do a thing. But our thing is different. And we have to know that first and foremost, if that makes sense, right? So even in terms of this voting thing and whatever else like that, I'm saying that when the first thing that he spoke about was us and ourselves, first identifying who we are and what our particular issues are. And if we find a way to manipulate the voting process in our interest, then we do that.
Yeah.
But voting is not an end in and of itself.
Exactly.
It's a means to an end. And unless we first sort out who we are and what our allegiances are, because that's what we're getting confused. Our allegiance is to the system and the society that is oppressing us in one way, shape, or form or another. Yeah? So, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for now.
But I wouldn't disagree with him.
No,
I don't think you would.
I wouldn't disagree with you. But we are in this system. So my argument is, we get our act together as black people, we understand what our issues are. So if we do go into the system, we manipulate what's going on in that system. We can't stay on the outside and change it.
I'm going to clarify what I'm
Why
saying.
are we trying to change that? Why are we trying to change a system that was never designed for us in the first place?
But we're in the system.
We
in here, we're not in
choose to
Africa,
engage
we're
with
here.
it.
No,
No.
why?
We choose to engage with it. And Africa is not a geographical place. Africa is Yasso. You understand what I mean? And just like Assata Shakur said, right, I want to make sure I quote it properly. Nobody in the world, nobody in history has ever gotten freedom by appealing to the moral sense of the people that were oppressing them. That's just how it is. That is just fact. So I understand this idea of, you know, kicking in the door. Now, there's our door over there. You understand what I mean? We don't need to integrate with them. There has never been any advantage to integrating with them.
Sorry, there was a question. There was a question here.
It was more a statement of support, really, in what you just said, brother, that Toni Morrison said that the definitions belong to the definers and not the defined. I think it's really, really important when using these definitions to know, like, how they've come about, where they've come from, and the fact that whoever you are, what I find now more and more with the media is we internalize this language of oppression.
Yeah.
Like, it's happening to the Muslim community, it's happening to blacks, Asians, whoever. It's across the board, and it's becoming so common that it's becoming normal that we internalize it. And my other point was, I've forgotten now.
But then could I just add to the kind of discourse that is happening, especially particularly with young people. So you have people that, okay, maybe completely disengaged, just cracking on, very comfortable being in the system, and then you're having young people that in a time where they're trying to find themselves and define their own narrative, they are beginning to become a bit more conscious as to what's going on, but then they suddenly get thrown into the big wild world and they hit these walls and they feel like they have nowhere else to turn to. So that's why you see all the madness that all here and there and everywhere, people running into very extreme politics and basically wasting themselves, wasting that mind. Because this is the thing, it's not, we got a lot of young people here that have got minds, a lot of very educated people. It's not that we're all just running senseless. It's that we're not channeling that energy and that creative thought into somewhere it's actually going to make a difference for our people. That's the problem, and it's because it's the lack of organised politics that our community has that then a lot of young people fall into other things that aren't doing anything. And then that's where you have people, they basically, on top of unemployment, on top of being spied upon and things like that, being marginalised by the community, that's where the outrage comes from, that's where the explosion comes from. And it's not just people that had just maybe had been kicked out of school and stuff. This is ranging from like top level graduates. Do you know what I mean? So
Can I throw something in there then? Just quickly.
Yeah.
We had Trojan horse in the council. Our Muslim brothers and sisters, for many, many years, you know, there were things out there saying that they had made a plan about how they were going to try and not integrate, but ensure that their teachings and what have you got into the system. What then happened was many of the schools, inner city schools in Birmingham, certain schools, the Muslim families, they filled the schools, they then ensured that they took over the governorships. As they took over the governorships, they made sure that the heads of those schools were people that they wanted to represent their cause. What they then did with doing all of this, it made sure that their religious views and their beliefs were taken through the education system. It was also then taken into politics. We have large numbers of Muslim councillors, we've got 2 MPs in this city that look after the need. Well, they don't, but they're supposed to look after the needs of a community. What has happened is they've got into positions of power and they've forgotten the reason they were put there in the first place. The problem with our community, we're not even on the map. So other parties, I know people say you can't go with any mainstream party, but if you've got 10 councillors, and I've got to do it because that's the level I'm at, 10 councillors that are fighting the needs of one community, and you've got one councillor trying to fight the needs of one community, you're not going to win. You are going to be absolutely drowned out. And I'm saying, do it your way, because you know I respect you guys. But also, some of us have to go in that system and try to change it, because we live here, and many of us will die here, and many of us are not liberated, even in our minds, that we're in the African way of thinking. When I was growing up, we were able to go to Saturday schools and learn about our blackness. A lot of people now, our young people, don't have those experiences, so they don't know where they're coming from. So on God's earth, how are they going to know where they're going? And I'll stop there.
Yeah,
Gina, when you're ready, just one observation.
I think it's probably a good thing to kind of identify like what issues that we're talking about, what issues that actually concern African people in this country. Like, what are these issues? Identify those issues, and if we're talking about using the vote politically, strategically, then why aren't we calling these people who are supposed to be representing us and telling them, look, if you're not going to deal with A, B, C, and D, then we're not voting for you. First of all, there's an assumption there. That means there's an assumption that we're actually that organised to actually turn out our people to come and say,
that is the issue,
which is an issue, and that's a grassroots movement that needs to kind of build that. So because that's not there, we can't realistically hold MPs, councillors to account.
But that's
because
the
they could
do
go
they even
into
represent us? Isn't that the question as well?
Well, this is the thing. We have
No, we don't.
No, but here's the thing.
That's the truth. We don't represent you. I represent the residents of Answorthwood Ward. In that ward, there is less than 20% African and Caribbean people. So the largest community in that ward are the white British.
Yeah, okay, right. That's so you're talking about but say I'm from London. You understand?
Yeah.
And there's parts of Birmingham where it's actually majority African Caribbean, or parts of in London where it's majority of African Caribbean Africans. So my question is
London, but not Birmingham.
In some places in Birmingham, too.
Which wards in Birmingham that are majority African Caribbean? There is not
wait,
one.
a significant proportion which actually
You normally have a third, and that would be wards like Nechells, Soho, wards like Aston. They third, all green, only about 20%.
Yeah, because if that
we
was
may look like
if
a
that
large
was
community,
organised significantly, that could do something. But that's a side thing, because as I said before, we're not organised in that sense. So for me, strategically, if we're talking about voting and elections, for me personally, that should be used as a consciousness exercise to show our people, because we've been talking a lot about Ferguson and America. I think, to be honest, we still got a lot of work here in terms of consciousness raising and making sure our people saying that, look, Labour's not going to do nothing for us. In fact, because I work for Stopwatch at the moment, and for 10 years, Stop and Search got worse underneath Labour. In fact, Theresa May's even done better than the last Home Secretary that we had under Labour. So I'm thinking, that's what I'm saying. For me, colours don't even matter. Colours don't even matter in that sense. My question is, what is our issues? We hold them to account, you understand? Because what's interesting is that the only time these people seem to listen is when the riot kicks off. So my thing is, if we're organised to such an extent where every time something goes down, you understand? And for me, this is just a small idea I like to put out sometimes. A riot kicks off. That stops. Okay, boom. We told you this was going to happen. You understand? And if you don't fix it, this is going to happen again. And if that's done consistently, organised and in such a way, then we can make all sorts of concessions in this country. We have to be organised in that sense. So as I said before, going back to elections, I really see them as strategic. Like, and raising consciousness in terms of getting rid of this illusion with Labour, because most people vote on family lines. My mum votes for Labour, my dad votes for Labour, so I'm going to vote for Labour. You understand? It's not any
We're going to go Martin, then
Yeah,
we're going to go
just-
Maxi, then we're going to go Malcolm again.
I want to try and respond to quite a few things, especially yourself and for yourself. One of the things why I don't like Black History Month, because I tell you why, because the function of Black History Month historically was about the training of black historians to contest racism. Black History Month tends to be
Where?
in the States.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you, but go ahead.
But what I would say is this: one thing I like about reading, because again, I work in prison. I've been working in prison for 30 years, and the big joke around prison is if you want to hide money from a black man in prison, put it in a book.
Are you
No,
gonna have money?
that's so. The relevance of it is this: is the word politics. We have party politics, and there's the politics of social change. They're different.
Yeah.
Malcolm and Martin were never politicians. At the time in America, there were elected African-American politicians who were informed by Malcolm and Martin, so they weren't politicians. But I want to give you a book. Long time before Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, there was a guy called E. Franklin Frazier who wrote a book in 1957 called The Black Bourgeoisie. He predicted there'd be a class differential within the African-American community that would be responsible for what we now see. What do we now have? We now have a class differential amongst black Britons, because all of the people involved in riots tend to be disaffected, poor, by and large, disengaged from the system. So in some respects, as Malcolm said in the speech, he said, and I quote, "Time when white people can come into our communities and get us to vote for them, those days are long gone."
And that's a long gone.
But one thing he made it, where he got it wrong, in a UK context, because I'm bringing it to UK, what he talked about is because there was some African-American leverage, that white people would use black people to come in, we'd vote for that black person, still controlled by that white person. But over here, we have a class differential, which comes out in celebrities, which comes out in the arts. So the leverage within that class differential means that before you can contest what white people are doing, you also have to contest what black people with a privileged position over black people are also doing. Which means, if you read E. Franklin Frazier's 1957 book, The Black Bourgeoisie, not only did he critique it, not only did he give a manifesto, but he actually showed and exposed how the transformation of that division needs to take place. And I go back to Black History Month, because we've failed. Because when people talk about Marcus Garvey, they don't know how to apply it. Malcolm X came up with an economic strategy within the Organisation of African American Unity. An economic strategy. He talked about it. We didn't hear it. So what I'm dealing with is, when we look at Malcolm, Martin, all of them, every one of them in there said this is how you do it. But we ignored it. So for me, if you want to buy something for him at Christmas, buy him The Black Bourgeoisie, make him read it every day, and then say, how do you apply that to Brixton, to Handsworth, to Manchester? So the reality of it is, if you're doing it in the spirit of Sankofa, we wrote it. I've got a PhD, and I can tell you, I've got a best-selling book. Black people don't want to read it. So I'm one of those, when I grew up, I'm 57, so I grew up and said, yo, we need more black doctors. I became one. And yet, what did it result in? And I did an experiment to say to black people, if we had a black bank, would you put your money in it or HSBC? They won't put the money in a black bank. Surgery. When you go to a hospital and say, would you prefer a black surgeon or a white surgeon? So my point is, we have to have a good hard look at ourselves and what do we actually want? And I'm saying there's a class differential. So the reality of it is, the middle class or the emerging black middle class in this country have got a very good strategic position. Why? Private healthcare. Free schools that David Cameron's talking about, there's a lot of black people who are wanting to get those free schools up and running. So what I'm dealing with is, you only got to look around you to see who does Boris Johnson employ. In London, who is employed on the London Underground, but who controls some of the economy in London? And some of that is affluent black bourgeoisie. And what I'm dealing with is, we don't want to accept that. Some of us have money, some of us are rich. So the bottom line is, we can talk about white people as the problem, and in the wider power structure, that part, but we also have a subculture of power that we don't want to accept. And what Malcolm said, part of the problem, part of the solution. So it doesn't compute, because you look different from me. Some of us who look like me are the problem too. And that's what the youths know. Because Malcolm appealed to the grassroots.
Yeah.
He didn't appeal to the bourgeois black people, because he posed them a threat. So we need to retake the history and apply what that speech did. But my point is, we've got to read. Who gets most excluded from primary schools and secondary school? The attainment gap for black graduates in this country is about 40%. So only 6 out of every 10 is going to go on and do well. So 40% of black graduates with degrees are going to fail. That has massive implications for social capital, networks, economic development, politics. And you know where you see this played out? Health. We have some of the worst public health. Diabetes, glaucoma, migraine, premature death, prostate cancer. So what I'm dealing with is the price that you pay for not achieving the objective of transformation and owning and controlling your own thing is premature death. So it's a public health issue alongside politics. And the politics of public health start to talk about that. So what I'm saying to you is the black bourgeoisie. And that came out a long time before all of this stuff. Malcolm was heavily influenced by sociologists at the time. But it's not something that we talk about, because people like Kai as a sociologist, me as a criminologist, all I would say to you is, Kai will tell you this, as black academics, black communities don't embrace us like they don't embrace politicians. But as soon as Little Wayne brings something out, or Jay-Z, so what I'm dealing with is we have to look at which God do we serve. And in the revolution, as Malcolm said, part of the problem, part of the solution. So I'm saying, read, analyse, apply. That's my point. The black bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
All right, what we're going to do, this bit of the speech has come up a couple of times. So I'm going to play it about 2 minutes, then there's 3 people at Maxi, then we'll 3 minutes, then we'll come to Tafadzwa. And okay, audience first, come to, is that all right?
Yeah.
So I'll go Malcolm, take some audience, come back to the panel. All right. This is the part of the speech that talks about the political philosophy of black nationalism. And as Tafadzwa was saying, the majority of the speech is about this. The vast majority of the speech is about what do we do as black people.
The political philosophy of black nationalism only means that the black man should control the politics and the politicians in his own community. The time when white people can come in our community and get us to vote for them so that they can be our political leaders and tell us what to do and what not to do is long gone. By the same token, the time when that same white man, knowing that your eyes are too far open, can send another Negro into the community, get you and me to support him so he can use him to lead us astray, those days are long gone. The political philosophy of black nationalism only means that if you and I are going to live in a black community, and that's where we're going to live, because as soon as you move into one of their, as soon as you move out of the black community into their community, it's mixed for a period of time, but they're gone, and you're right there all by yourself. We must understand the politics of our community, and we must know what politics is supposed to produce. We must know what part politics play in our lives. And until we become politically mature, we will always be misled, led astray, or deceived or maneuvered into supporting someone politically who doesn't have the good of our community at heart. So the political philosophy of black nationalism only means that we will have to carry on a political program of re-education, to open our people's eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature. And then we will, whenever we get ready to cast our ballot, that ballot will be cast for a man of the community who has the good of the community at heart. And the economic philosophy of black nationalism only means that
there's a extended part where it talks about economic philosophy, social philosophy, and it really is about how do we organise ourselves as a community, which is really important in this discussion about voting. So I wanted to throw that in there because it come up. And there was 3 people from the audience and then we'll go to...
Yeah, I just wanted, I think it's very important, the dialogue between you and...
Me?
Yes, you and Paulette. And that's around the issue of integration. You know, remember we rejected some years back, and you would tell me, the notion of assimilation, because we, you know, they think we were stupid, so we throw that out because you lose everything. So it's the current model of integration. Now, what people must understand is that we don't. It doesn't mean biological integration. You don't have to jump into it with anyone. But this is where I took issue with Malcolm a little bit here when he says those days are long gone. When you know, I'm afraid he's right here with us. He's my hero, you know, but I have to question some of the stuff because we're not mature yet. And right now, as we were talking about majority and minority, we're in such a bad, we located so badly geographically. We can't even say Answorth. We should have owned Answorth. We should have had the entire, like the young was saying. But we don't. And Paulette, you're quite right. You're talking about generic politics. You're not representing, you're representing everybody. So nobody can really hold you to ransom. Our community can't do that. We're disadvantaged. So we have to really, and yes, I embrace what Malcolm is saying, but we have to get real. We have to integrate. I left Wolverhampton this evening. I was with the Operation Black Vote tour bus. And I see the initiative, what they're trying to do. And I personally will declare to you, as I do the other night, I have no intention of voting for any of the mainstream parties. Because for 40 years I've voted for Labour. You know, just like 85% of us, and so what? So, but I'm going to vote. Here comes the argument. I'm going to vote, but I'm not going to vote for the mainstream party. So I can't leave this room without telling people that you need to use the voting system until we're politically mature. We need to do that.
Well, that was
because we have to integrate in that respect.
That was one of the points.
It doesn't make sense because it's a reality. You know, we're not strong enough. Our people, as Paulette was saying, they're gonna die here. They don't know anywhere. We have to fight. And if you look, finally, let me just say this: the Black Panthers, one of the most radical parties in America, they went down the route of make sure they get people to vote. South Africa, and for the first time, people vote. You know, so come on, we have to. When we think about the word integration, we must realize we're not going to sell out our soul, but we have to live within that structure. But then we manipulate it.
All right, we'll get to the front. You two to the front.
It's all good, you know. It's all good, but I like the fire in the belly.
Question for Paulette. How do we get more involved in politics, and how do we get represented more in politics?
For me, and I'm going to tell you how I believe we can do it. I believe we have to take over some of the structures that are there already. I actually believe you can actually do it. I've seen people do it, but we believe as a community that we can't do it, but we can. And I think we lack the belief in ourselves. We have power that we haven't even tapped into.
Exactly.
And for me, as a black politician, I would love to see large numbers of black people there. So when I look behind me and I make a statement, I have support. At the moment, I have just gone through one of the biggest battles of my life because they wanted to get rid of me. A small group of other people decided that I have to be politically correct. Not easier. I made that speech before you come in. All right. I apologize. A small group of the Sikh community decided that economically and politically they were far stronger than the Afro-Caribbean community. They decided they wanted rid of me. They couldn't get in because the argument they had was They, in other parts of the city, they have 3 Muslim councillors. So why can they not have 3 Muslim councillors in Answorth Wood? When I came up for selection, they came together and decided that they wanted me removed. When they couldn't get a Sikh person, they looked for an English woman to replace me, to in the future replace her, because it would have been easier to get rid of her in years to come.
Okay.
What happened was, within my party, when I needed to vote, when people needed to vote on whether I could represent them at the next election, out of nearly 100 people in the room, there was less than 10 that were African, Caribbean, whatever, right? The bulk of the community was Sikh. There was over 70 people in that room who were Sikh. So I couldn't have relied on that black, broad-based vote to get me through. So what I had to do was, when I went back through my second selection, I had to work with the very community that wanted rid of me.
Yeah.
And what happened was, with doing a lot of underground work, they then said, well, this is wrong. And so they backed me, as well as the English community and the African Caribbean community. But as a black person, I couldn't have gone just to my community to keep me there, because they weren't there in their numbers. So my argument is, I know that we want something of our own, but sometimes you have to infiltrate other systems if you want to get change.
Okay.
You're not going to do it on your own.
You want to? I can take you. Wait,
No. I'm following you, you know. You're the king, right?
But we do have to speed up a little bit, because we haven't got the economic philosophy about nationalism. We don't want to run buildings.
It's the problem. There's so much time and everything.
We are going to complete that, and then we'll take audience and we'll come back.
All right. I do want to talk about the International African People's Parliament before we close, and just give some examples of how we can do this thing, based on what we're trying to do. All right. But a couple things. I even took notes for this one. That last clip is a very serious clip here, because near the end of it, he says certain things where he says we must understand the politics of our community, but we don't want to say that. He said we must understand what politics is supposed to produce. The people that say to you, get involved in the political process, do we even understand what the thing is? Politics is what it's supposed to produce, what it's supposed to do. Because they feel as this idea of voting as though it's a requirement of our citizenship that we're supposed to vote. Vote for people that ain't serving our interests and whatever else like that. And they tell you that if you don't vote, then you don't have a voice. But excuse me, I pay taxes in this society. I don't only pay taxes to the government that I vote for or don't vote for. Whoever the government is, I'm supposed to pay taxes, correct? If I vote Conservative and Labour gets in, I still got to pay taxes, not true. So, by virtue of the fact that I pay taxes, I still have a voice, And a no vote, I've never voted in my life. I'm not as senior as you, my elder, but I've never voted in my life and I have no intention of voting. Unless I'm voting as a block of organised black people who are serving a particular agenda. Let me just say this, right? See, when we're in this country, you spoke about the gerrymandering situation, Alright, let's deal with that for a second. In this society, we've got a situation where by the last general election, black people run around social media telling everybody to vote Labour so that the BNP don't get no seats. The BNP ain't never been in power in this country. Have never held the reins of power. They're not responsible for the crime rate in the black community, not responsible for the poverty rates, not responsible for the unemployment rate, not responsible for the high rate in terms of prison and mental health and so on and so forth. But black people are running around trying to tell everybody not to vote BNP. Vote Labour so that the BNP don't get in power. Alright. Conservative government, before 1997 when New Labour came in, was started the process of building private prisons, many of which were young offenders institutions. That means they were building them for your children. The Labour government in 1996 was against the development of private prisons. They came in 1997, Jack Straw, the Home Secretary at the time, announced, they just got in, announced that the Labour government was going to continue the process of building private prisons. We're dealing with the fox and the wolf. Right. Another part of the speech, he talks about how the Democratic Party seek to tell us, at the time they were dealing with voting rights in America. And the Democratic Party in the South was fighting against the Democratic Party in the North on the issue of voting rights for black people. So how the Democratic Party in the North tried to curry favour with black people, telling that it was the Democratic Party in the South, yeah, who was supposed to be more hardline and racist. In fact, parts of the Democratic Party in the South, their actual slogan was white supremacy. It was in your face, all right? And that was how they did it. Over here, we've got UKIP, yeah? UKIP is nothing but the acceptable face of the BNP, right? And it allows not just the Conservative Party, but all of the parties to sway more to the right, as long as you are not as far as right as UKIP. That is the way the system runs. They're all playing the same game,
Why are they going left?
right? That's what I'm saying. So everybody, including Labour, is moving to the right, because you can move to the right as long as you're not as bad as UKIP. And we're falling for this foolishness. Yeah? That's how the game that they play. So just last and finally, to touch on what you were just saying, Auntie, yeah? In terms of the games that were being played with the council seat and so on and so forth. You see, all them people that came after you, before they came to that meeting, they were organised in wherever the Sikh temple is. Right? They were able to do that because when you walk down a certain street in Birmingham, they run all the businesses. Tell me if I'm lying. Yeah? And next to the business is the temple.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah? And they move from the temple to the and business is discussed in the temple and then acted out on the road, on the street. Talk the truth. Yeah? Am I lying?
No.
Right. The difference is us. We get individuals get a sense of themselves and they say, I'm going to go into politics. And then we say we're going to change it from that. We put the cart before the horse. So those people now, you remember, listen to what they said. They haven't got the candidate yet. But they need somebody else that's going to suit their interests until they can find the candidate. Where are they going to find the candidate from? When they go to the temple, they're going to have a little meeting. Yeah? Find the candidate to come and challenge whoever's there at the moment. Do you understand what I'm saying? We put the cart before the horse. Why? Because we don't think in terms of nation. And I understand what the brother is saying in terms of, what is the term you use? The book on the bourgeoisie and so on and so forth, but we're not thinking in terms of nation. These people are thinking in terms of nation. That's why. So their allegiance is not to the society in which they live, their allegiance is to their community and where they come from. So they have a culture that informs them. They have a spiritual order that informs them. And that culture and that spiritual order is housed within the context of institutions in which they operate. Yeah? That's how it goes. And it's institutions in which people develop their power. Not through trying to kick in the door. It's about having your own. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so we don't, it's black nationalism. The key word is nationhood. So what is a nation? The basis of all things. You have to start thinking in terms of nation. What is politics supposed to produce? Politics is the science and art of nation building and nation maintenance. I'll leave it there, sir.
Alright, what we will do is, anything from the floor, we'll just go around, take them all, and then give people on the panel final thoughts. So anybody I've got two people ready.
Yeah,
in the front, and you had your hand up as well. Yeah?
Are we into strategies now then?
So anybody wants to say anything, speak,
yeah,
ask a question,
in the meantime,
put
what is
your hand
to be
up.
done?
Strategies. Tea parties.
Yeah, what is to be done now in the meantime? In terms of before we get to the stage where we're actually developing ourselves and coming together collectively, I don't see these things as parallel. What is to be done in this current moment?
Okay, what is to be done?
You said something about nation building. Where did you begin?
Yoo-hoo!
Tea parties.
It's kind of interesting how I've come here, because I signed up in, I think it was February, about the government was sorting out like a scheme to do Generation 15, so like people that are 19 to 25 to sign up and come in and talk about who you're going to vote for and what's your views on politics and etc. And but they gave me an application about my points on such as housing, immigration, National House Service and stuff like that. But I just laid it out. I was going to be honest with them in the paper, and I said, I'm not going to vote for anyone, and because none of them are supporting black issues and etc. And when I will go there tomorrow, I'm going to talk to them tomorrow, because I've got the interview apparently to talk in a group, etc. And I am going to say, I'm not going to vote, but if I did vote, I'll probably vote for UKIP, because on the basis of this, we as ethnic people, but particularly since I'm black, when we talk about black people, have been disrespected and have been marginalized in this country, even though we've contributed so much to this country. In the 1960s, we was in invited here. We didn't ask to come here. We were invited here to come and help and build this country up after the Second World War. Yeah, and we was told we was getting all these jobs and etc. But there was the racism and all these things. Every single ethnic group has come here. They've been invited. They've been disrespected, etc. And I'm thinking, well, I'm going to vote for UKIP on the basis of, you know what, they know where they stand. They are open with their racism, rather than you get Conservative and Labour who say, oh, we're for all the people and we're for all of Britain, yeah, but they're really just for white people and middle class people. So at least if I'm voting for UKIP, I know what I'm getting. And if they get into power, yeah, even though it's a tragic thing, they're probably going to just kick us all out or whatever. And I want them to kick us all out because I want them to realise, if they kick us all out and take us back to our own countries, they'll realise what they missed out on and how much we contribute to them. Because, like, for example, we could go to Idi Amin, who kicked out all the Sikhs and Indians in the country, but those people was building up the country. So as soon as kick them out, the country that Idi Amin was in, it just went to crap, really. So that's what my opinion is. So the question I want to ask with you guys as well is, when I go tomorrow and speak to these people, what is there anything that you guys want me to add? You guys want me to say?
Did you have a question? I remember you had been exercising. I forgot.
Yeah, I mean, I want to come back on so many things, but I don't have time. I just want to add something else in terms of the mechanics of voting as well, because it's all well and good engaging people, registered to vote, but actual mechanics of voting is set up for a certain type of person to vote. I'll give you a very quick example with my family. It was voting evening, local elections, and I says, come sis, let's go and vote. It's nearly 10 o'clock or whatever. It's raining, bro. I ain't going. Right? She's in there watching the box, X Factor, whatever. This is the number to vote. Voted. So unless voting is easy as voting for X Factor and all that foolishness on TV.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean? No matter how much you engage us, if it ain't convenient to do, because we live in a very convenient society, there's only be a certain type of people going to vote, even in the rain.
I hear you.
It's better that way, I think, because then you know who's really on it for change versus you just sitting in the house and making it a convenience thing, isn't it? So,
yeah, but
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it's still an informed decision as well. As I say, even when you're voting for your X Factor, you're making an informed decision on what you've seen, what you've received with that screen. So, and a lot of us, have information through some kind of screen, tablet or whatever. So it's, it's still the mechanics of voting also we'll need to look at as well if we're going to get involved in it.
The postal vote came in for people who have disabilities or elderly and things like that, so instead of coming to the thing they can use,
Or you can do a postal vote. There are other ways to vote rather than going out on the day, and the postal vote is the way some of our ethnic minority communities actually lock it down. Because what they do is old families just have the postal vote. Whoever comes in says vote this one, tick, postal vote goes back, and in one household you can have 8 votes and it's on lockdown. Our community, we're not even engaged, we're not registered to vote. So can I make one point?
Well, actually, and now you started speaking, we'll just start with Paulette, and we'll go around the final thoughts of the panel.
This is final thoughts.
Final thoughts of the panel, go around. Start with Simon.
Earlier there was a quote made. There was a quote made about I have the right, and whether I vote or not, I still pay my taxes. Rubbish. If you don't engage, you don't have any rights. I'm up for election this year, and we do a thing called voter ID. So we know every house in the city that people are in there that are voting. I will knock on the door for those who have put a vote down or said their intention. But those who aren't registered to vote or have no voting intentions, I walk on by. How are their views going to get into the system if the people that are there are ignoring them totally because they are not in the system in any way, shape or form? I would urge you tonight, that right that you have to vote, why until we set up some sort of broad-based campaigning, some sort of nation building to get our people to vote, please register to vote and use your right to vote. Even if you only go in there and vote for a minority party. If people like the Labour Party see that we have a big vote that's swinging elsewhere, you'll see if they won't soon take notice of us. And that's all I'll say. They will take notice, but we are just not engaged.
Yeah, but they take notice, they're only just going to give us what we want to come back for the moment. They're not going to give us what we need. They're just going to, like, they shape their policies only to grasp our attention for a short period of time. And then for the long run, they're not doing anything beneficial. They're just trying to draw us in for 5 minutes, delude us into thinking they're doing something for us, when in fact we're just getting trapped over and over and again. It's like a process that keeps happening.
But that's why we need to build up our broad-based campaigns and our nation building through whatever vehicles we have out there, so that we don't get trapped and so that our issues are taken on board. The reason we get trapped is because we're like headless chooks. We have no direction. So people can use us any way they want because we are not clear on where we are going.
Okay, so in terms of kind of what's next, or what people can at least do productively when they do here and stuff, I think, again, just speaking out to maybe young people, even current students, and things like that. This is obviously a critical time for oneself as well as the people around you, and I think I think at the moment what is happening is that there are going to be spouts of people that are becoming conscious and trying to hold on to that, but because they're being bombarded with so much misinformation and miseducation from left, right and centre, above and below and everything. So it's about maintaining that one for oneself first and foremost, but then I feel like a lot of young people are being disengaged from their communities as well, what that means to them. Again, we're internalizing this kind of individualism that this society brings within us. We need to. There's a lot of black people that would actually honestly say that I never get stopped and searched. What's it got to do with me? That is the wrong mentality that we need to have. The completely wrong mentality that we need to have, because it's on our doorstep. We know that we don't need to go over it again. So it's about trying to again homing into various spaces. I think it's really important to have safe spaces across everywhere, be it in an institution, outside on the road, things like that. Maintain those, own them for yourself, and direct wherever it is that you want the discourse to be around. I feel like for young people, we need to be able to have discussion and be able to challenge some of the ideas that we have for ourselves and allow that space for growth, instead of having pressures from elders in particular. Sometimes feel like we have to kind of come out of our naivety too quickly, and there's a massive pressure in that, and of course that comes from also our own enthusiasm that we want to contribute, but it takes a little time, and at the moment it is a lot. There's a lot going on at the moment that we need to understand. So it's about connecting with your reality, understanding it, and then making educated decisions based on that. And I hope that organisations like OBU enable that to happen, facilitate that, and build those bridges between young people and the community.
I keep saying Tanawai, I explain what it means, sorry. As a member of the Alkebulan Revivalist movement, we regularly say Tanawai. All it means is give thanks to the creator, Tanawai. Spoken in the Shona language of Zimbabwe. Right, I'm going to start by reading this quote from the speech, where he says, "So the political philosophy of black nationalism only means that we will have to carry on a political program of re-education to open our eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature, and then, when we get ready to cast our ballot, not before, and then, when we get ready to cast our ballot, that ballot will be cast for a man of the community who has the community at heart." Right. And so that's what I'm saying. I am not saying never vote in your life. I am saying that one comes before the other. I don't believe in voting for the sake of voting, because that's just playing the game. If I vote for the sake of voting, what I'm doing is legitimizing a system that is oppressing me without having any intelligent engagement with it. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, Auntie, I'm not just disagreeing what you're saying in principle. I know. I am saying, I met you before, I know your son. You know what I mean? And that kind of different things.
And you know how conscious he is.
Yes, indeed. No, sorry. So I'm just saying, I know where you're coming from. So I'm not saying that. But brother said a thing a while ago. He said that there's a politics. Well, he said that the politics of
There's party politics.
and the politics of social change. Politics of social change is informed by the politics of nationhood. Every system, institution in this society operates on the basis of a national agenda. That is why they can predict how many prison places they're going to need 20 years' time based on what's going on in primary school right about now. That's by design. You understand what I'm saying? So that's all I'm saying. I'm saying that we have to be intelligent in terms of how we're going to use it. And for me personally, unless we're collectively using it and in an informed way, I prefer say don't vote. Yeah, I teach in a Saturday school. My time is better spent teaching those. If I never vote in my life and I spend the rest of my life teaching children in a Saturday school, my time is better spent teaching them than going to a ballot. Yeah, that's my personal point of view. I'm just saying that. Yeah, right. Last and finally, I said I'm going to talk about the International African People's Parliament, the institution that is in development. Interim means that it don't develop yet; it's in development. Yeah, and I'll contextualize it just by talking about the last National Black People's Day of Action that we had on the 2nd of March. Yeah, the whole context of it is to basically try and develop a body similar to what Malcolm was talking about in the speech in terms of unifying different spectrums of the black community to have a mandated voice that speaks on behalf of us and is able to act on behalf of us, whether we have politicians in power or not. Yeah. So just last Black People's Day of Action, we had a brother from an institution called the African Cooperative Union that spoke, and basically they're galvanizing different businesses and individuals to invest in a pool to galvanize resources to do things in their own community. Their focus at the moment is developing a community business that operates on behalf of the community, is able to employ people within the community. It's starting small. If you look at the speech of the Ballot of the Bullet, Malcolm X talks about this in the economic section. Starting small with the businesses and so on and so forth, and then developing them. Yeah, so that was spoken about. That institution is on board with the ACU. We had the Nation of Islam that was down there. They run a school, an independent school in London called the New Mind School. Yeah, OBU was supposed to be there, weren't able to be there, but because I was delivering the keynote, I was able to speak on behalf of OBU. And we've had some challenges in INA, yeah, in terms of developing and so on and so forth. But even with those challenges, we still aren't over the importance of the Marcus Garvey nursery happening and developing itself. And so one of the things that we will be doing at some point is having a day in London where people can just come and invest, buy their shares, make a donation to help the school build in Birmingham. You know what I'm saying? Right? I'm saying that, so there's that. There are councillors involved in INA. You know what I'm saying? They know that some of us don't really deal with the voting thing, but it's about unifying the efforts, yeah? There are brothers and sisters that work in media, you know what I'm saying, and developing other institutions and so on and so forth. And it's about having that first. I'm saying, before we teach black young people to vote, teach them to be socially aware and involved in their own community. If you never vote, make sure when there's a Saturday school, volunteer at a Saturday school. Yeah? Know about the black businesses in your community. Spend money with them. You understand what I'm saying? People that are organizing, see if those black businesses are able to run apprenticeships. Know where the black plumber is. Yeah? The black electrician is. Yeah? And learn that trade. You know what I'm saying? And galvanize the effort so that we have institutions that are able to connect with each other. Yeah? And mutually benefit each other so that when we want to send somebody to go get a council seat, I'm not against local politics, but they know there is that mandated voice that you're talking about. So that people know, that person knows that they were sent there. They didn't go there and now they're trying to get the people. They were sent there by the people. The people done send them to do a job. Yeah, so they're accountable to that people right there. So if you want to know more about that, you can check inapp.org.uk, and it's just a small effort. See if you like what's going on, and there's information about how you can get involved. And once we dash through all the challenges that we've got right about now, we'll be out there again. Yeah, thank you for having me, brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Okay, what does that say?
All right, yeah.
Join INA, right? So, yeah, basically for me, one of the what you was asking, what in the meantime, just like Tafadzwa was saying, join and we start building. That's what we do in the meantime. We start, instead of leaving here and just, oh, that was a good event, we actually activate something. We do something with the information that we learn. We do something with the speeches that we listen to and all the books that we read and all the reading that we do, and we apply it yeah, we have to start from somewhere. And one thing I do agree with what you said, and I think, was it Robin Walker that said the same thing, that one thing that we were lacking is like raise confidence that we're able to do something. I don't know if it is the fact that we internalize all these things that we see, that we don't trust each other and we don't do this and we don't do that. I don't believe any of that. And I think once we can apply the confidence that we do have, once we can be comfortable within ourselves to know, so you know what, one thing that's always highlighted to us is the power of the black vote. Yeah, so I'm not trying to in any way like diminish that. I'm actually highlighting the power and the strength within our vote. The problem that I have is, what are we doing with it? You understand? And I do feel like your efforts could be so much more used in INAC. I would rather, if you was like part of INAC, for example, we've got the whole crew behind you, you understand? But the efforts that you have, your good intentions, like I said, I know you as well, I know your son as well, I know your husband as well, you understand what I mean? So I know where you're coming from, I know you're one of us from here, but I do feel like your efforts are going to be futile and wasted because of the arena that you're in. I would much rather put that effort into, even something simple like joining OBU, you know what I mean? Like I said, unity is in the mindset, and an African perspective, being an African starts up here, it's not geographical. So unless we have that ideology within us and we join with other people that have that same ideology, we're going to be back here in 20 years' time having the same conversation. You understand what I mean? So what we do from here is apply the things that we do. We join, if you don't want to join OBU, join something else that deals with nation building. Support your black businesses, support, like Tafadzwa was saying, support black initiatives that are going on within the area, because
by a share in the Marcus
Garvey Nursery. You understand what I mean? These are all very small steps. Like I said, but if all of us did that, if we left here today and everybody in here, joined OBU, the amount of things that we would be able to do for the rest of the year would be fantastic. So it's little things like that. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
I want to talk, because we've had a conversation. I've spent 35 years advising black men in prison who are serving life for murder, some on death row. So I'm going to use armed robbery as a way of showing you what I say to people practically. I sit with guys who have done 15, 20 years who are coming out, who everybody knows when they come out they're going to create mayhem. And they say, Martin, how can I get involved in civic participation? I've killed someone, I've sold crack. Now, one thing we forget, in prison, it's a very oppressive regime, much more oppressive than out here. But yet there's some amazing things that offenders do to change who they are. And these are the things that I'll say in my world, because I've got to keep it real, when a youth sits in front of me and he says, how am I going to make it back and how can I be successful? I need a place, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot to do. First thing I said, what tools do you have? In our society, we have what's called a deficit model. We start with what's wrong. As a criminologist, I start with a strengths-based approach. So it's not what you don't have, it's what do you have. So the first thing is, what tools do you have? What tools do you need? Some people need a sense of humour. Some people need to smile. Some people need to find a doctor. If you go to prison, if you go to prison and you're homeless, when you leave prison, you're homeless and you can't get a bank account, you're not registered, you can't get a GP. So it's what tools do you need? What alliances do you need to forge? Some people don't want to talk to a probation officer. Some people don't want to talk to a Christian. Some people don't want to talk to a politician. So what alliances do you need to forge? Because Malcolm X forged alliances that were uncomfortable. The other thing is with armed robbery, why we fail at armed robbery is because we don't know what role we need to play. Your role in life changes over time. I'm 57, so what I was like when I was 20 is not like 57. Part of understanding the role, and this is how I want to finish on this, is there's a huge intergenerational need.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I've known Maxie. I remember me and Maxie, Max is older than me, and I remember one time I said, Bridget, how old are you? And he told me, I said, Bridget, you need to stop doing what you do. And then I said to him, Maxie, how is it at your age? You are like you are. And he talked to me about his mom, his family. People ask me to say, this young person here will sit and say, how did you get there? I know people who've been working in prison for 12 months and they can't hack it. I've been doing it for 35 years. So the other thing is, it's about making a connection and asking the question, and not behaving like you know everything. And so what I'm dealing with is understanding your role. You go to Africa sometime, you have to seek permission to speak. You have to seek permission to even begin to say, can I do this? So what I'm dealing with is, at the moment, Ed Miliband is in opposition, so he can say what he likes. You're in opposition. And until you get into a position of power, you can't really say and do the thing. When I look at the campaigns we've got, what I will say for you, if you're a Twitter, Facebook, YouTube person, learn how to organise with that generation. In prison, you know what I love about prison? As much as they shouldn't have phones in a prison, I can tell you one thing. I met a youth recently who said, yo, Martin, he's from London, East London, so I'm coming out. He said he came out of prison and he said to his brethren, he saw his brethren, he said, look, don't tell anybody I'm back. And his brethren were so excited, put him on Twitter. Within an hour, there's about 100 men around his mum's yard. You know why? Because Twitter went round, boom. I studied Obama's election campaign. In the swing state of Ohio, it was young people that put Obama in a swing state that put him in. It was grassroots campaigning, but Obama understood the internet. It was the hip-hop community that rallied around Obama. What I'm dealing with is, we need to be talking to our artists. We need to be talking to those grime artists, grime blog and all. So what I'm dealing with is, in armed robbery, we fail because we don't know our role. The man who carries the gun wants to drive the car. The man who drives the car now wants to carry the gun. And unfortunately, just look at so what I'm dealing with is, there's leaders and there's followers. I've recently just written a book on thought leadership. Thought leadership is the go-to person. The reason that we buy Apple, because it's the must-have product. You have to be the go-to person. You have to be the person that people say, I need to talk to that person. If this man leaves, if some of you here, you listen to what this man says, don't let him go before you take his number, his email, because maybe that's the alliance you need to forge. If you want to come and talk to me, I'm 57, so the alliance that I have is an analysis of how structures and power put together. But I'm not the same as a grassroots activist who's going to go on the front line because I've been doing it for so long. So therefore, I'm clear about my role. So roles are interchangeable. I may not agree. I remember when Alkebulan first set up, and we'd have big arguments about the difference between this and that. But you know something? I think it's your brother. I don't know if you got older brother, who was one of the founder members.
My dad, actually.
Your dad? Because you look just like him. When you well, I met your dad, and your dad was one of the fiercest, strongest, and he's still doing it. You just, that's when you come in, I thought you've lost weight. You look like your dad. Yeah? But when we rolled together, if you talk to your dad, when your dad would come out, he'd introduce me to do the poetry. He would do the speech. Somebody would cook the food. And then we'd have music, because when we're finished, we need music. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? This ain't about being rhetorical, because in my world, you go into a maximum security prison and tell 15 guys serving life, and they've got 35 years, how they're going to contribute to their kid's life. It's not just about the ballot, because I can tell in the world in which I live, I've got youth right now, and I met one a couple of weeks back, 13 say, yo Martin, they don't calm it down soon, brethren, I'm gonna spray people. 13. My son Adika was at a bus stop. A youth pulled out a gun, 13, started shooting after the police. So what I'm dealing with is, you just know what your role. If your role is to sit and listen to me this youth here comes and speaks to me every time he's on campus. He sits and listens and listens and listens and listens. Even when he's got to go to lectures, I get him to go to his lectures, but he listens. And all I said to him, my role in his life is to pass on, not to hold him. Is that not true? Definitely. Could you just tell everybody roughly before we finish, how do we roll? Just so you understand how it works. How we roll.
I see him in the most random places at the most random times. So I just walk out the lecture now. I see him in the cafe, goes on, or upstairs, or anywhere. So we just talk and we have a conversation about life in general and how things are affecting us as youths and generally everything. And it always gets interesting, more interesting, more interesting. And the thing is, mine is definitely a good inspiration, man. Definitely.
And what I wanted to say to this young person, just so you understand, it's two-way. I learn as much from him as he learns from me. Yes, I have a PhD, but I can't garden. I can't decorate. I can't fix cars. I can't play football. I got one thing. I'm just a brain in a jar. That's it. But I know what my role is. So when you get up in the morning and you're in your house, what is your role in the house? What is your role in the school? What is your role on a bus? What is your role wherever you go? Because if you don't know your role, the police, the criminal justice system, the mental health system will tell you what your role is. So my point is, be clear about your role. Find out what tools you need. And there's people on this platform, but you also have a responsibility. Because there's black people who are autistic. There's black people who are dying of AIDS. There's black people who have all sorts of problems. So my point is, you've just got to decide who your audience is, who your role is. So if you come to me and say, yo, Martin, let's march that. No, I'm not going to do that. My job is to sit and pass on what I know until he's ready to say, Martin, that's enough. Because I've got to prepare for my final exit. Because if you study African culture, when you get to a point of you're an elder, your job is to pass it on. And therefore, I'm preparing for my exit. Your job is to come and soak it, get it from me, do something with it so I can actually just surround by people. So when I die, I can say, I've closed the circle.
That's perfect, because my job is to make sure that we exit on time. I'm going to ask you to thank the panel, and then we can thank the panel. We're going to take a couple more. We're going to throw down.